Hi there, it's Simon here. Today I wanted to talk about 5 music books that I absolutely love and why I think you will love them too. I'll see you in a second. Before we start the video, please do subscribe and hit the bell, and you will be supplied with 2 videos on guitar stuff every week. Lessons, gear reviews, whatever. Also, if you have $3 a month and you're able to support the channel, please do at Patreon. www.patreon.com/Simon Morell. Alright, so number one, I generally don't love musicians' autobiographies. I tend to find that they just sort of talk about parties. I went to this party, I met this girl, and we had some drinks, and we had a good time, instead of actually about the music, which surely is the first reason they got into a band or became an artist or whatever. So like, for example, in Keith Richards' life, which, look, I thought was okay, there's a section in the middle where he talks about how he discovered alternate tunings and why he uses G-tuning, and that basically defined the sound of the Rolling Stones for, you know, the 5, 6 best years, sort of 60s, 70s sort of thing, right? Like Brown Sugar, Gimme Shelter, Honky Tonk Women, a whole bunch of those awesome tunes, Jumper Jack Flash, are all in alternate tunings, and he spends 8 pages of, like, I don't know, a 1,000-page book or something talking about the thing that actually defined his sound. I mean, he talks a little bit about, but he misses the point. Anyway, what I'm trying to get to is that I love this autobiography. This is an autobiography of Miles Davis, and man, he's a hard-nosed dude. However, despite the language in it, there's a bit of a language warning on this one, there's a bit of language in it. I find it absolutely fascinating. There's so many good stories in it. He talks really about the music and what attracted him to the music and why he got into the music, and things like stories of things he experienced, and you know, how it helped him growing as a musician at the beginning of his career, and then even into his career into the 80s and all that sort of stuff. You know, there's a lot of sort of, you know, his drug dependency sort of stuff and the drugs in the jazz scene at the time. You know, that's kind of interesting. I'm not really that bothered about that sort of stuff, but the music stuff is great. So check this out. He's talking about 1943. I stayed with Eddie Randall's band for about a year, from 43 to 44, I think. I used to call him Boss Man, because that's what he was to me, the boss, and he ran a tight band. I learned a lot from him about how to run a band. We used to do the musical charts and arrangements of Benny Goodman, Lionel Hampton, Duke Ellington, and all those bad cats that was playing back then. There were a lot of great bands around St. Louis, like the Jetta Pillow Band and George Hudson's band. Man, both of them bands were really good. But Ernie Wilkins, who was the arranger for the Blue Devils when I was in that band, and Jimmy Forrest came out of Eddie Randall's band. So I guess I'd have to say that Eddie Randall, was a leader of great musos. But George Hudson was a mean trumpet player too. St. Louis, like New Orleans, is a big trumpet player's town, and because of all those marching bands in St. Louis, I guess, all I know is that some bad fellas on trumpet came out of there, and when I was growing up, trumpet players from all over the country used to come through and play in those jams. I remember I ran into Clark Terry again at the Rum Boogie. It was a different story from when I first met him. Now, here he comes into the Rum Boogie to hear me play. I said to him, when he ran up telling me how bad I was, "Yeah, Clark, you came up to me saying that stuff when you wouldn't even talk to me when I met you over in Carbondale. I'm the little dude you shine on over there." So man, we just laughed, and we've been great friends ever since. But him telling me I was bad and could really play at that time did a lot of good. I already had confidence, but Clark telling me this just gave me more. That's a really, really cool story, right? So you got Miles Davis, who ends up being one of the great jazz trumpetists of all time, you know, just having a grown-up story about somebody who he looked up to as, you know, as somebody who was a great player, giving him a story, and you know, that kind of stuff, that really, really makes a difference in any muso's life, I reckon. You know, when you have another muso tell you, "Oh, that was pretty good," and you know, constructive criticism of what you're doing as a musician, whether it's in the business side of the music or the music side of the music, you know, Awesome. So this is a cool book if you can deal with the swearing. Number 2 is I'm a big fan of sciencey sort of stuff, but I was never really any good at science at school. But I love the idea of it, and so this mixes 2 awesome things. It mixes music and the effect it has on you personally, on your person, and it's called "This Is Your Brain on Music," and it's by a dude called Daniel Levitin. But Daniel's got an interesting story. He started out as a guy who was a record engineer, and he produced, worked on albums by really famous people, like crazy famous. And then he decided to quit that and become a neuroscientist, which is, of course, right? Of course. So he must be one clever guy. And it's just really, really cool. It just talks about, there's a bit of music theory in there and why that fits together and the impact that has on your brain and your music receptors and your ears and how all that works. It's not a dry book in any way. It's actually kind of a page turner. I've read this book heaps of times, and every single time I really, really get something out of it. I just love it. It talks about melody, beat, tempo, all sorts of things that have a big impact on you, and it's super well researched because this guy's a hardcore scientist, right? Just a really terrific read. That is a ripper. Number 3 is a book written by a Aussie journo and a colleague of his. It talks about, basically, it's like a music practical criticism on a whole bunch of different tunes, all sorts of things. From Springsteen, Joni Mitchell, Rihanna, Schubert, all sorts of things. It's a pretty broad range. I absolutely loved this book. I actually was given this last Christmas by a student of mine, so shout out to Stephen, thanks for that, it's been terrific. What I did was I actually set a little YouTube playlist up and then had my headphones on, listened to the tune, and then read about the tune in the book, so it was fresh in mind. It was really, really cool. So let me just read you a little bit here. It's talking the chapter 11, Jolene, obviously by Dolly Parton. "Don't Mess With My Man" sang Irma Thomas on her first single in 1959, and she sounded defiant. Still, the soul queen of New Orleans, as Thomas would soon become known, was prepared to be reasonable. The song was by Dorothy LaBostrie, co-writer of Tutti Frutti, and its full title was "You Can Have My Husband, but please don't mess with my man." Well, that's soul. Country singers aren't so phlegmatic. Jolene, 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 Jolene. Dolly Parton's delivery is control enough. There's no pleading in the voice. But the music tells a different story. The rising urgency is in the pitch, which reaches the top of the octave on that final lean, tumbling down despairingly via the flattened 7th to the 5th. "I'm begging of you, please don't take my man." So it's really, really cool. So sometimes with these sorts of books, they can be pretty hardcore, and they talk really, really about music theory all the time. But it just kind of blends in the music theory with how it makes you feel, and I find it just absolutely fascinating. The fact that it talks about getting to the top of the octave and then coming down via the dominant 7 to the 5, so you get that kind of bluesy feel. If you know anything about chord theory, you know that a dominant 7 chord has got 1 major third, perfect 5th, dominant 7. So you get that kind of country sounding chord on the way down of her melody. It's awesome. Plus Dolly Parton is just absolutely an amazing songwriter. Really cool book. I really, really love that one. 4. Number 4, I'm the biggest fan, not maybe the biggest fan, I really, really like a lot of the Stax Records stuff. Otis Redding, pretty great. Sam and Dave, a bunch of those sorts of Stax records. I love Albert King's record that he put out on Stax, and yeah, it was great. Anyway, so Robert Gordon has done this absolutely amazing and super well researched book. He talks to everybody that he would need to talk to that was involved with Stax to pull out an absolute corker of a book. I mean, it's like Booker T. Jones wrote the foreword, right? So it's just absolutely brilliant, and it's not super like, oh, everybody's awesome the whole time. It's a really, really good snapshot of how he is, you know. And I grew up on a small island in the UK, right? So this is like super crazy cool to me. Anyway, so the bit I really love, I Don't Want to Be Right. If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right, by Luther Ingram. It was written by Homer Banks, I think. I absolutely love it. There's this character that he talks about called Johnny Baylor, who's like kind of works at a record company, but is a bit of an enforcer. So he sounds kind of a crazy dude, I've got to say. But here's a story about Luther Ingram's If Loving You Is Wrong, I Don't Want to Be Right. This is just terrific. Luther's song was cut in about half an hour, which is how long Banks says it took to write. Half an hour? Awesome. Baylor brought back the tape to Stax to have it mastered for release. I was in the mastering room one day at lunchtime, says engineer Larry Nix, and Johnny Baylor came through with Luther Ingram. Johnny was waving a German Luger, and he walked up to me very quickly and pulled a reference disc of If Loving You Is Wrong out of his sleeve and said, "Did you do this?" My boss had done it. He was at lunch. Johnny threw the record against the wall, pointed at the lathe and said, "Do you know how to do this?" I said, "Sure." Luther convinced Johnny to leave, and I went and get the master tape. Started working on it. My boss came back, looked at the EQ settings and said, "You can't use that much EQ on there." Luther stepped up and told him what had happened. He said, "Johnny Baylor is looking for you." Not only did my boss turn and leave the building, he quit the company. I took the reference disc to WDIA, the city's leading black music station, and they play our tests on the air to hear how it sounds. Jim would go to his Lincoln Continental and listen. Someone else would go home on their hi-fi. On my ride back to Stax, I heard the DJ play it 4 times in a row. Johnny loved what I did, and from then on, I was cutting masters at Stax. What a story, man. I love that. My final book is this one, The Guitar Handbook by Ralph Denyer. My mum actually gave me this book when I was about 11, so hi mum. And it is absolutely amazing. It's like just basically everything about the guitar kind of book. It talks about famous guitar players at the beginning, and then goes on to talk about how acoustic guitars are made and how they come together over history, like a history of acoustic guitars, history of electric guitars, how they're put together. But the best bit is in the middle, the green pages. So you get this great big thing called Playing the Guitar, and it's got a whole bunch of really super useful stuff about how you play the guitar, and I found it absolutely invaluable. It's a brilliant, brilliant book. And I still use some of the stuff in lessons now. It's absolutely fantastic. At the back, it's got a bit about technical sort of things. If you're really into that, that's awesome too. It's never really been my bag, but it certainly taught me how to change strings on guitars and those sort of basic things. Awesome. Absolutely love it. About how pickups work, how all that sort of stuff. So that is the last book. So this is a bit of a weird video today. No guitar involved, and I'm sitting in my comfy chair. But not so bad, I reckon. Thanks so much for watching. I do appreciate it. Please do subscribe and hit the bell for notifications of new lessons as they come up. There are 2 every week, and now over 450 lessons on this channel. Whew! Insane in the membrane. So if you have $3 this month and you would like to help support the channel, that would be unreal. Go to www.patreon.com/Simon Morell. I will see you later. Thanks so much for watching. I'm going to have a bit of a read and a cup of tea. I'll see you then. Bye for now.